In Attica, time doesn't pass, it strangles you. Every second is a lesson, every minute a threat, and every hour is a negotiation with fear. But a week inside Attica feels like a lifetime you never ask for. This is the story of Marcus Lyle, a former street hustler who thought he understood danger, until Attica introduced him to a version of himself he didn't know existed. Sentenced to 5 years for armed robbery, his first 7 days were a brutal crash course in violence, betrayal, and psychological warfare that no sentence could prepare him for. The guards deny what happened. The inmates only whisper about it. And the administration has buried every piece of evidence. But Marcus survived. And what he lived through reveals a truth darker than any official record will ever admit. He didn't walk into Attica for punishment. He walked onto a battlefield. And he learned one thing. In Attica, you don't serve time. Time serves you to the wolves. Day 1. Most inmates remember their first steps into Attica the way soldiers remember their first steps onto a battlefield. Not for the details, but for the feeling. A weight. A pressure. A sense that the world you knew has been replaced by something built to break you. Marcus Lyle arrived just after sunrise. Not that sunrise mattered here. Attica's sky always seemed grey, even when the sun was trying its best. The transport bus hissed to a stop outside the front gate, a towering wall of concrete stained by decades of storms, riots, and the ghosts of men who never left. Inside the bus, Marcus looked out through the steel mesh covering the window. He wasn't scared, not yet. But underneath that calm face, underneath the slow breathing he'd practiced on the ride up, something in him tightened. As the gate opened, a guard shouted, "Welcome to Attica. Keep your mouth shut and your eyes forward, unless you're looking for trouble." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. The clank of the gate behind him became the response for every inmate stepping through its jaws. The walk from the gate to intake felt like crossing a border into a new planet. Rusted chain link fences on both sides. Guard towers looming overhead. Men with rifles following his every step. The crunch of gravel under his boots felt louder than it should, as if the prison itself was listening. Inside intake, fluorescent lights hummed like insects trapped behind glass. The cold air hit his skin. The smell of bleach mixed with sweat filled the room. A guard with a clipped mustache and dead grey eyes slammed a clipboard onto a metal desk. Lyle, Marcus. 5 years. Robbery. That right? Marcus nodded once. "Doesn't matter," the guard muttered. "Nobody serves time here. Time serves itself." Fingerprinting. Photographs. Strip search. The routine felt invasive, mechanical, designed to remind him he was no longer a person. He was a system entry. A number. A body to be monitored, recorded, and controlled. And then came the part Marcus wasn't expecting. They walk him down a long hallway lined with scratched metal doors, each one with a small viewing slit. Doors that felt like they were holding secrets. A taller guard leaned close and whispered, "Attica's not like the other spots you've been in. Don't trust nobody. Not the inmates. Not the cops. Not even the walls. They hear everything." Marcus kept walking, but his jaw clenched. They stopped at the very last door in the hall. A door that looked thicker, almost reinforced. The guard tapped the metal with his baton. "Orientation cell. 1 night. Tomorrow you get assigned a block." But as the door began to swing open, Marcus noticed something strange. Another officer down the hall gave a subtle signal. A slight flick of the hand. A gesture. Like a warning. Or maybe a threat. The heavy door slammed shut behind him. Pitch black. Complete and total darkness. Marcus didn't move at first. He just stood there, letting the darkness settle. But something felt wrong. Usually, orientation cells had a small light, a vent, something. This one didn't. And then he heard it. Breathing. It wasn't his own. It was slow, controlled, coming from the far corner of the cell. Marcus took a step back, his heart kicking up just once, not from fear, but from pure alertness. "Who's in here?" he asked quietly into the void. The breathing stopped. A moment of absolute silence. Then a low voice answered from the dark, "You ain't supposed to be here." Marcus froze. "Who are you?" A long pause. Then, "Someone they don't let out." The voice was calm. Too calm for this place. 7 days, the stranger whispered. "If you want to see day 8, don't trust the ones wearing badges." Before Marcus could say another word, the viewing slot in the door snapped open and a guard shouted, Lights coming on. A burst of blinding white light filled the cell. Marcus blinked hard, his eyes stinging as they tried to adjust. When his vision finally cleared, he looked around. The cell was empty. No man. No shadow. Nothing. Just Marcus standing alone in the middle of a concrete room that looked like no one had occupied it in years. But he knew what he heard. 7 days. Don't trust the badgers. And somewhere in that deafening silence, Marcus realized something. Attica wasn't just dangerous. It was hiding something. Something the guards didn't want him, or anyone, to uncover. By late afternoon, Marcus was escorted out of the orientation wing. The hallway lights flickered, buzzing like something alive. A guard handed him his prison greens and slid a thin mattress under his arm. C-block, the guard said. You're lucky. Could have been worse. But Marcus could see it in his eyes, the kind of look people give when they say lucky but mean the opposite. The kind of look that hides a dare. Or a warning. They stepped through a set of blast-proof doors, and C-block revealed itself with a roar of noise. Metal clashing, men shouting, radios crackling, footsteps echoing through stacked tiers of cells. It was a vertical canyon of steel bars and concrete, each tier holding stories that could drown a man. As Marcus walked, eyes followed him. Some curious, some predatory. A few, calculating. Attica had rules, unofficial ones. You don't smile. You don't stare. You don't look lost. And you never, ever show fear. Marcus kept his face blank, his step steady. A guard pointed his baton at the third tier. Cell 3 to 27. Your new home. But before they even reached the stairs, a sound cut through the air, a slow, deliberate clapping. Clap, clap, clap. Marcus looked toward the end of the tier and saw a man leaning casually against the rail. Early 40s. Broad shoulders. Tattoos curling up his neck like roots strangling a tree. Eyes sharp enough to cut through steel. He wasn't smiling, but his mouth carried the shape of someone who could, if smiling served a purpose. That was Trouble. And Trouble had spotted him. The man stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back like he owned the place. Fresh meat from intake, he called out. Welcome to C-block, rookie. The guards ignored him. That alone told Marcus everything he needed to know. The man studied him with a tilt of the head, like someone sizing up a dog before deciding whether to pet it or put it down. Name's Rix, he said. I run this tier. You walked in quiet. I respect that. But respect don't make you safe. Marcus didn't respond. Silence was still his best weapon. Rix chuckled. You think you're tough? You think you've been through real time? This ain't Rikers. This ain't County. This is Attica, where weak men get their stories ended, not told. Other inmates gathered on the walkway, drawn by the tension, a half-circle of faces hungry for entertainment. Marcus felt the pressure mounting, but he wasn't about to fold. He finally spoke. I didn't come here for problems. Rick smiled for the first time, slow, dangerous, like a lion who hears a wounded animal whisper. Nobody comes here for problems, Rick said. But problems come for everyone. Then he stepped close, too close, until Marcus could feel his breath on his cheek. Be careful where you walk. C-block remembers mistakes. A guard barked, move it. Marcus took his mattress and climbed the stairs to his cell, but he knew every step he took was being marked, measured, filed away. When he reached cell 3 to 27, he pushed the door open. It creaked like something old and angry. Inside were 2 metal bunks, a toilet that never stopped dripping, and a small square window scratched beyond recognition. He wasn't alone. A man sat on the lower bunk, reading a worn paperback with pages yellowed by age. He looked up, mid-30s, calm eyes, face lined by something deeper than age. Trauma, maybe. You Marcus? The man asked. Marcus nodded. The stranger closed his book slowly. I'm Bennett. A beat of silence. Word travels. You already caught Rix's attention. Marcus sat on the upper bunk, muscles still tight from the confrontation. I didn't do nothing. Bennett exhaled, a long, tired exhale. In Attica, doing nothing is enough. A moment passed. Somewhere in the block, a distant scream echoed, then abruptly stopped. Boots pounded the floor. Cell doors clanged. Radios screamed static. But inside 3 to 27, Bennett lowered his voice. Stay sharp. That man. Rix. He isn't your biggest problem. Marcus frowned. Then who is? Bennett leaned back against the wall. The guards. Marcus felt his chest tighten slightly. He remembered the breathing in the dark cell. He remembered the warning. Don't trust the badgers. But Bennett wasn't done. This place got secrets, Marcus. Old ones. Buried ones. And the wrong people think you know something, even when you don't. Marcus looked at him carefully. Why me? Bennett closed his eyes for a moment, then reopened them with a look that carried more truth than comfort. Because you weren't supposed to be in that orientation cell. Marcus froze. Bennett nodded slowly. Someone wanted you there. Someone wanted to see what you'd do, or what you'd hear. A cold feeling crept through Marcus's spine. And whatever you heard, Bennett said quietly, that was just the beginning. Outside, the block lights dimmed, signaling lockdown. And somewhere deep within Attica's walls, a door slammed shut with a sound that promised nothing good. Night fell hard in Attica. It wasn't just the darkness outside. It was a cold that got under your skin, settled in your lungs, and made every sound feel louder, sharper, closer. The cell doors slammed shut, the main lights cut out, leaving only a dim, orange glow. I lay on the upper bunk, body still, but my mind was racing. Below me, Bennett was already asleep, or at least he sounded like it. His breathing was even, steady, the kind of sleep a man learns to find in the middle of chaos. But I couldn't rest. I kept hearing that voice from the orientation cell, the one that shouldn't have been there, the one that vanished the second the lights came on. The words echoed in my head. You ain't supposed to be here. Don't trust the badgers. 7 days. I stared at the ceiling, trying to tune out the sounds of C-block. Whispers from another cell, the soft tap of metal on bars, someone crying a few doors down. Then, I heard something new. Something that didn't belong. Tap. Tap tap. Tap. It was coming from the wall. A pattern. Deliberate. I leaned over the edge of my bunk. Bennett, I whispered, you hear that? He didn't move for a moment. Then, without opening his eyes, he mumbled back, ignore it. Why? I asked, frowning. He finally opened his eyes, not with fear, but with a kind of tired resignation. Because whoever's tapping, they ain't tapping for you. I lay back down, but the sound got louder, clearer. Tap, tap, tap tap, tap. I recognized it. It was a code. A signal. Before I could say anything, Bennett sat up. His voice was low and serious. Listen to me, he said. There are parts of Attica that don't exist on paper. Rooms, old tunnels, cells from before the riot. Places they sealed up but never completely cleared out. I turned my head. What's that got to do with this? He ran a hand over his face. Some of those places. You can still get to them, if you know how. And the men who end up in those spaces. He trailed off. They don't come back. A chill went down my spine. You think the voice I heard, it came from one of those places? Bennett didn't have to answer. His silence was enough. The tapping finally faded away, and for a second, I thought I could relax. That's when I heard it. A quiet, metallic scrape just outside our cell. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't a guard's keys. It was something dragging along the concrete walkway. I shifted to the edge of my bunk, peering through the bars. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a shadow moved across the far wall, slow, limping, uneven. Bennett, I whispered again. Someone's out there. This time, he didn't even look. Stay in your bunk. The shadow stopped right in front of our cell, standing perfectly still. I held my breath. And then, a folded piece of paper slid silently under the bars. The shadow moved on and disappeared down the corridor. I stared at the paper on the floor. A note in Attica is never a good thing. It's a warning, a threat, or worse, an invitation. I dropped down from my bunk, landing softly on the floor. Bennett was sitting up now. Don't touch it yet, he whispered. Why not? He leaned in close, his eyes sharp. Because whatever's in that note, it could change your entire week. He checked the hallway through the bars, then gave me a quick nod. I picked up the paper. It felt old, yellowed at the edges. This paper didn't belong in a max security prison. I carefully unfolded it. 3 words were written in shaky pencil. Block D, midnight. My chest tightened. I looked at Bennett. What's D block? He swallowed hard. The block they closed after the riot. So why tell me to go there? Bennett's voice dropped to a whisper I could barely hear. Because whatever lives in that block wasn't supposed to survive. I folded the note, my heart pounding in my ears. Somewhere deep in the guts of this prison, something was moving. Something was looking for me. It wasn't a guard, and it wasn't an inmate. It was something else entirely. And my second day in Attica had barely even begun. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. The cold hand wrapped around my ankle pulled me backward as the silhouette at the end of the hall twitched again. Its movements were sharp, broken, like it was trying to imitate walking by studying humans, and getting it all wrong. The inmate under the cell door, his eyes wide with a terror that had lived inside him for years, rasped again, "You gotta run. You gotta run before it sees you." I tried to pull my leg free, but his grip was desperate, shaking. "Let go." I whispered harshly. The inmate's eyes rolled up toward the thing that was slowly approaching. "It ain't human," he gasped. "They kept it down here, since the riot, since before." I finally yanked my leg away and stumbled back. The silhouette took a long, disjointed step forward, and the lights overhead flickered violently. "Who kept what down here?" I demanded. But the inmate didn't answer. He just slid back into the darkness beneath his cell door, like a rat retreating into a hole, whispering one last, terrifying warning. If you speak to it, it remembers your voice. A shiver tore straight up my spine. I turned and ran. I sprinted down the hallway, weaving past open cell doors that breathed cold, dead air across my skin. Behind me, the silhouette's footsteps echoed. They weren't normal steps, but sharp, metallic taps, like someone walking with bones instead of feet. As I ran, the cell doors slammed shut one by one behind me. Bang, bang, bang. It was like the prison itself was sealing off every path, forcing me forward, forcing me deeper into its gut. I reached a corner and slid across the grimy floor, catching myself on a rusted pipe before leaping up again. The hallway ahead split in two. One path led deeper into D block, the other toward a service passage lit by a single, dying bulb. I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the service passage. Halfway down the corridor, something hit the wall right behind me, hard. Concrete cracked and dust exploded across my back. Whatever that thing was, it was fast. My heart was slamming against my ribs, sweat cutting lines through the dirt on my face. I pushed harder. At the end of the corridor, I found a half-open maintenance hatch. I shoved it wider and squeezed through into a narrow, damp tunnel built long before any modern renovations. Pipes hissed overhead and the floor vibrated, like heavy machinery was moving deep beneath the prison. I sprinted into the darkness. A second later, the silhouette slammed into the hatch behind me. Metal shrieked. The walls trembled. I didn't look back. The tunnel spit me out into a small, forgotten storage room covered in dust so thick you could choke on it. Old rye helmets, rotten paperwork, broken restraints. Everything smelled of mildew and a history Attica tried to bury. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard, chest heaving, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, human. I braced myself, fists up. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, bright, white, official. A guard stepped in. Not a rookie, not some corrupt officer with lazy eyes. This was a captain. Broad shoulders, silver bars on his collar, a face carved from stone. Captain Rhodes. I'd heard guards whisper his name. A man who knew things. Buried things. He looked at me without surprise, without anger. Just assessment. You weren't supposed to be in D block. His voice was low, calm, almost gentle. I took a step back. Somebody left me a message. Rhodes blinked once. Not with confusion, but recognition. What did it say? I hesitated. Block D, midnight. He exhaled slowly through his nose, not with relief, but irritation, like someone who just noticed a flaw in a plan. Show me the note. I didn't move. He raised one hand slowly. Relax. I'm not here to punish you. I am here to get you out before you die in a place that doesn't officially exist. Reluctantly, I pulled the note from my pocket and handed it over. Rhodes examined it with his flashlight, and then he said something that froze me cold. This handwriting hasn't been inside Attica for 11 years. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Rhodes folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. It means whoever you think you heard down here, you didn't. I clenched my jaw. I know what I heard. Rhodes stepped closer, looking me square in the eyes. Let me give you some advice, Lyle. In this prison, ghosts talk more than living men, and the walls repeat old voices like echoes that never die. I stared at him. What was that thing? He didn't answer right away. He glanced back toward the tunnel I came from, as if expecting something to crawl out. Then he said, "There's no thing in D block. Officially." My anger started to rise. I saw it. I heard it. It followed me. He spoke quietly, but with iron behind every word. If you want to survive your 7 days, forget what you saw. Forget what you heard. And forget that hallway exists. I shook my head. You expect me to stay silent. He leaned in. I expect you to stay alive. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a side door I had noticed, a rusted panel leading to another maintenance tunnel. Come on, before it realizes you're gone. I froze. Rhodes didn't answer. He just shoved me forward. If you want truth, Lyle, Attica will show you. But not down here. Not yet. I stumbled into the dark tunnel as he followed, sealing the door behind us. And for the first time since I entered Attica, I realized something terrifying. The guards weren't covering up an inmate, or a riot, or a crime. They were covering up Attica itself. Something inside this prison wasn't supposed to exist, but it did. And it wanted me. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Not really. He kept his eyes half open, half closed, hovering in that thin line between rest and survival. In a place like Attica, that line was razor-sharp. Every shift in the air, every cough from a distant tier, every metallic click echoing from some unseen door made his muscles tense like he was bracing for impact. He had survived day 2. Barely. But day 3 was already waiting for him, crouched like a predator in the dark. When the morning sirens wailed, the cells trembled, literally. Attica was an old beast, held together with rust, memory, and fear. Marcus stepped out into the corridor with the same forced calm he saw on every other inmate's face. It was a look that said, if you show fear, you die slowly. If you show nothing, maybe you get to see another sunrise. Breakfast was a blur of noise and steam. The mess hall smelled like old metal and the sour breath of men who'd lost entire decades in this place. Marcus kept his tray close, but his eyes closer. He scanned the room, locking onto groups, studying their movements, their silent signals, trying to understand the rules before they buried him. That's when he noticed it. A guard, staring at him from the far wall. Not just staring. Watching. Officer Rourke. It was a name whispered with the same caution men used when discussing a deadly disease. Everyone knew him. Everyone avoided him. And Marcus felt the weight of that stare burn right through the noise, the bodies, and the shadows. But Rourke wasn't the immediate threat. The real danger revealed itself after chow, when the inmates were herded outside for yard rotation. Attica's yard was a graveyard for hope. Its walls were scraped raw by decades of winter storms, its fences crowned with barbed wire that danced in the wind like serrated ribbons. Marcus walked slowly around the perimeter, trying not to look lost, trying to breathe in a space where the air was never truly free. Then, a voice came from behind him. It wasn't a threat or a warning, just a quiet whisper. You're in Block C now. That means you're going to see the wall. Marcus turned. It was the silent lifer from the mess hall, an inmate named Eli Ramirez. Lean, tattooed, with 27 years of time already served. He moved like a man whose pulse had learned how to hide. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Eli gestured with a small tilt of his head, so subtle that anyone watching might miss it. Marcus followed. They walked to the farthest, oldest corner of the yard, a dead zone where guards rarely looked and inmates rarely lingered. The concrete here was darker, stained by weather and secrets. The air felt colder, heavier, like it carried something unspoken. And then Marcus saw it. A long stretch of wall etched with names. Hundreds of names. Carved deep. Carved angry. Carved with desperation. Some were older than he was. Some were carved so shallowly that they faded into nothing halfway through the letters. And others looked fresh. Fresh enough to still feel the sharp edges. This corner wasn't a memorial. It wasn't art or an act of rebellion. It was a warning. Eli stepped closer, his voice low but steady. Every name on this wall belongs to someone who did NT make it past their first week. Marcus felt a chill crawl down his spine. 7 days. 7 chances to simply vanish. Eli pointed to a cluster of names jaggedly carved near eye level. We call it the weak wall. If your name ends up here, it means someone decided your story should end before day 8. Marcus swallowed hard. He had been here for 48 hours. 48 hours, and he could already feel the walls choosing sides around him. Eli stepped even closer, lowering his voice until it felt like the air itself was speaking. Someone's watching you, and they're waiting to decide which wall you belong on. Marcus couldn't respond. His throat had tightened, and the yards suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were inching in. Eli leaned in, his eyes strangely calm. You want to live. Stop walking like a man who thinks the worst is behind him. Because in Attica, the week never gets easier. A guard shouted across the yard. Inmates shifted. Steel gates groaned. As Marcus walked back toward the cells, something inside him changed. This wasn't just about survival anymore, not just another prison with another set of rules. This was Attica, a place where names were carved long before bodies disappeared, a place where 7 days could swallow a man whole. And Marcus had just learned the first, most brutal truth: the dead don't haunt Attica. Attica haunts the living. By the time Marcus stepped back inside the cell block, the noise hit him like a wave he couldn't brace for. Attica had a way of turning sound into something physical, something that crawled inside your bones. Metal clanged. Voices overlapped. Tension moved like smoke between the bars. But beneath all that chaos, Marcus noticed one thing: something was wrong. The routine felt off. The guards were tighter, quieter, like they were holding their breath. Inmates moved cautiously, avoiding eye contact more than usual. Conversations were clipped, coded, or cut short entirely. Eli's warning still echoed in Marcus' head. Someone's watching you. He just didn't know who. Not yet. They marched the tier back to their cells, and as Marcus sat on his bunk, he caught something out the corner of his eye, a shadow down the hallway that didn't match the pacing of the guards. It lingered near the stairwell, hesitant, or calculating. Every instinct he had from the streets screamed at him. He's being hunted. But by who? He tried to shake it off. Tried to focus on the dull rhythm of the prison schedule. Tried to breathe. But the hours dragged, each one heavier than the last, until lights out finally arrived. Attica at night was a different world. A world without rules, without witnesses, without mercy. In darkness, the prison didn't sleep, it plotted. The lights clicked off row by row, like someone sealing a coffin. Marcus lay still, gripping the thin sheet over him, listening. Most men snored. Some whispered. A few cried quietly into the night. But Marcus wasn't listening to them. He was listening for footsteps. And eventually, they came. Slow, soft, measured. Someone was moving down the tier, not a guard. The rhythm was wrong. Guards stomped. Guards wanted you to know they were coming. This was different. This was deliberate. Marcus lifted his head slightly, peering through the bars. A figure moved in the hallway, wrapped in the dull glow of the emergency lights. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but his steps were almost soundless, too controlled, too careful. The other prisoners stayed silent. Not asleep, silent. Like they recognized the presence moving through the dark. Marcus whispered into the emptiness. Who is that? No one answered. No one had to. The figure stopped 3 cells away. Then 2. Then 1. Marcus felt a cold sweat break across his back. The man turned his head slightly, just enough for the faint blue light to catch the edge of his jaw. Marcus saw a long scar that cut across the side of his neck, a scar that looked almost surgical, running clean and deep. He had seen faces like that before. Faces of men who didn't fight trouble. They created it. The stranger didn't speak. He just stared into Marcus' cell for a long, unnerving moment. Breathing steady. Expression blank. Presence heavy. Then, in a slow gesture, the man raised 2 fingers and tapped them lightly against the bar. Once. Twice. A signal. A warning. A promise. Marcus swallowed hard, but didn't move. The man walked away without a single word. No threat. No demand. No noise. Just silence. And when he reached the end of the tier, he disappeared into the shadows like smoke slipping under a door. Within seconds, the inmates who'd been holding their breath started whispering among themselves in small, fearful bursts. Marcus couldn't make out their words, only the tone: cautious, nervous, terrified. Then he heard a name. Soft, but unmistakable. Marlowe. Marcus froze. He didn't know the name. But judging by the reaction around him, everyone else did, and none of them wanted anything to do with him. Marlowe. The man who walked at night. Marcus had just learned the second rule of Attica: some people own the darkness, and if they come looking for you, it's already too late to hide. He lay back down, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind racing. Why had Marlowe stopped at his cell? How did he even know his face? And what did those 2 taps mean? Marcus didn't sleep at all. Not that night. Not after that. Because now he understood something Eli hadn't said out loud. In Attica, death isn't random. It's assigned. And someone had just put Marcus' name on a list. When dawn finally crept into the block, its pale light didn't bring relief. It brought clarity, and clarity was the one thing Marcus didn't want. His mind replayed the previous night on a loop. The footsteps, the shape in the dark, the scar, the 2 taps against his bars. Marlowe. The name had been whispered with the kind of fear Marcus had only heard in stories about men who didn't need weapons to control a room, just a presence. But Marcus didn't have time to unravel the mystery. Morning count began, loud and aggressive. Guards barked. Inmates shuffled. Cell doors clicked open like hungry jaws. Another day inside Attica had begun, and the prison wasted no time reminding him that fear here wasn't a feeling, it was a condition. As Marcus stepped out of his cell, something caught his eye. Something small. Something wrong. A piece of folded paper, wedged under the edge of his bunk. Notes didn't just appear in Attica. Not without intention. Marcus glanced sideways to make sure no one was watching. The guards were distracted, arguing with an inmate who refused to stand straight. The moment their attention cracked, Marcus slipped back inside, lifted the bunk edge, and pulled the note free. His fingertips trembled, just slightly, not from fear of the paper, but fear of what came with it. He unfolded it. One line. Carved, not written. The letters pressed so hard they nearly tore the paper. Day 3 is where they test you. Marcus felt his breath catch. This wasn't a warning. It was a schedule. He crumpled the note instantly and hid it in his waistband. He knew better than to toss it in the toilet. Guards checked flushes on random days for exactly this reason. He'd get rid of it later. When he stepped back into the corridor, the eyes on the tier felt different. Men who'd ignored him suddenly tracked him with quiet curiosity. Others avoided his gaze like he was radioactive. A few leaned against their bars with the slow, practiced stillness of predators waiting for movement. Marcus didn't know if they were curious, or if they already knew. Yard rotation came early, which was unusual. The guards pushed the inmates faster than normal, like they wanted to clear the block before something unstable cracked open. As Marcus walked toward the yard gates, Eli appeared beside him, not with a greeting, but with a silent, sharp glance. He spoke without moving his lips. "You got a note, didn't you?" Marcus didn't answer. Eli narrowed his eyes. That was answer enough. Don't react. Someone's watching. They always watch the ones they mark. Marcus swallowed hard. Eli slowed his pace, letting the crowd pass around them. He leaned in just enough to let his words slide into Marcus's ear without drawing attention. "You want to know the truth? Marlowe doesn't pick people. He gets assigned people." Marcus felt a chill run through him. Assigned. As if this whole thing wasn't random. As if someone had decided Marcus was a piece on a board they were moving. The yard was colder today. Not weather cold, tension cold. Something was shifting. Something everyone felt but no one spoke about. Weapons weren't visible, but you could sense them. Hidden under sleeves. Tucked into waistbands. Concealed in palms wrapped tightly closed. And for the first time since he entered Attica, Marcus felt like the prison was actively circling him. Not because he was new, but because someone had decided his 7 days needed to be shaped a certain way. He kept walking, trying to blend in, but blending was impossible now. A tall inmate with braided hair and scars down both arms nudged his shoulder as he passed. Not hard. Not aggressive. Just enough to send a message. "We see you." Another inmate spat on the ground in front of Marcus's feet, not looking at him, but making sure he noticed. We know. A third stood against the gate, staring directly into Marcus's eyes with a hollow, unblinking intensity. We are waiting. Eli muttered under his breath. That's the test starting. Day 3. They crowd you first. Pressure you. See how you move. Who you look at. Who you walk near. Marcus kept his face blank. Eli continued, someone wants to know what kind of man you are before they decide what to do with you. Marcus whispered back, and if I fail the test? Eli didn't hesitate. Didn't soften it. You won't make it to day 4. The yard whistle blew. Marcus looked up. 4 guards stood at the tower, scanning the crowd harder than usual. Attention in their stance suggested they knew something was brewing, but not what. Or maybe they did know, and they simply weren't going to stop it. That was the part that bothered Marcus most. Then, a voice drifted from behind them. Dry. Calm. Emotionless. He's moving too clean. Someone needs to bump him. Marcus didn't turn. Didn't flinch. Eli did, just slightly, enough to recognize the voice. He leaned into Marcus. You hear that? That's the voice of someone who's been paid to start your test. Marcus didn't breathe for a moment. Didn't think. Didn't blink. He finally understood the note. Day 3 wasn't about violence. It wasn't about an attack. It was about provoking a reaction. Any reaction. Flinch too fast. Weakness. Fight too soon. Threat. Look scared. Pray. Look ready. Challenge. Marcus suddenly felt like he was standing in the center of an arena he never agreed to enter. Every man in that yard was watching him. Some out of curiosity. Some out of fear. Some out of hunger. And somewhere, whether in shadow or plain sight, Marlowe was watching too. Testing him. Judging him. Deciding. The test had begun. And Marcus had no idea what the rules were. What happens next? Find out in the next episode. In the split second before impact, the world always gives you a warning. It's a change in the air, a break in the natural rhythm of things. Your muscles instinctively tighten, bracing for a blow your mind hasn't even registered yet. Marcus felt that moment arrive. It wasn't loud or violent. It was just there. The prison yard hummed with its usual sounds, boots scraping concrete, guards shouting from the towers, the low murmur of men trading secrets and cigarettes. And then, a pocket of silence formed around Marcus. Subtle, but definite. The space around him seemed to pull tight, like a drawn string. Eli, standing beside him, felt it too. His body went rigid, his eyes narrowing as he saw the movement forming behind Marcus. He spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. They're coming. Don't square up. Don't back down. Just breathe. Marcus didn't turn. Turning meant you were expecting it, and expecting it meant you'd already failed the test. A cold breeze touched the back of his neck. He heard the crunch of boots on gravel getting closer. And then it came, the bump. Hard, fast, and surgical. A shoulder slammed into Marcus's back, angled perfectly to jolt him forward, to force a reaction. It was just enough to start something, but not quite enough to be called an attack. It was a test. Marcus stumbled forward one step, caught his balance, and stopped. He didn't swing. He didn't even look back. His jaw clenched, but that was the only sign of tension. In an instant, the entire yard went silent. In Attica, silence was the scoreboard. Every eye was on him, waiting to see what he would do. The man who'd bumped him, a tall, muscular figure covered in ink, walked past without a single glance, his expression a perfect blank. As if Marcus wasn't even there. Marcus stared at the ground for a beat, then lifted his head and resumed walking. That was it. Eli let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Good, he whispered. You passed the first one. Marcus kept his voice steady, not showing the adrenaline coursing through him. That was supposed to break me. Eli shook his head. No, that was supposed to make you choose. Marcus frowned. Choose what? Eli's voice dropped even lower. Whether you're prey or someone worth studying. Someone worth studying. The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. Studying meant interest, and in a place like this, interest meant danger. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, a sharp whistle cut through the yard. This wasn't a routine signal. 2 guards jogged toward the center, barking orders that no one was listening to. Inmates backed away slowly, like animals sensing a fire but trying to act casual. Marcus's eyes followed the commotion. A young kid, maybe 19, was curled on the ground, blood dripping from his mouth. Another inmate stood over him, fists clenched. But that wasn't what grabbed Marcus's attention. His gaze was pulled to a figure watching from the edge of the yard. A man with a scarred neck and a cold, unblinking stare. Marlowe. And Marlowe wasn't watching the fight. He wasn't watching the guards or the kid on the ground. He was watching Marcus. He wasn't hiding it. In that chilling moment, Marcus understood. The fight wasn't a random act of violence. It was a stage. A performance set up for one reason: to see how Marcus would react. Would he help? Would he look away? Would he panic? Marcus kept his face a mask of neutrality. Not cold, not scared. Just detached. After a few long seconds, Marlowe finally turned and vanished into a crowd of inmates. The guards dragged the bleeding kid away, leaving a smear of red on the concrete as the yard slowly returned to its usual hum. Eli leaned in close. He's watching you hard now. That means you did something right. Marcus shook his head. Or something wrong. As the inmates were herded back inside, Marcus felt a shift deep in his gut. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Day 3 in Attica hadn't just been a test. It was the opening move in a game he never agreed to play. And somewhere in the shadows, someone, Marlowe, or maybe someone even worse, was already planning Day 4. The day the threats become actions. Day 4 started before I even opened my eyes. It wasn't noise that woke me, but silence. A silence so thick and unnatural it felt like a hand grabbing my shoulder, yanking me from sleep. There were no shouts, no clanging metal doors, no insults echoing down the tier. Just quiet. A heavy, intentional quiet. I sat up slowly, straining my ears. Even Eli, in his cell across from mine, was still. It was like the entire block was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, footsteps. Not the usual heavy, clumsy stomping of the guards. These were different. 2 pairs of boots, measured and confident. The rhythm was deliberate, full of authority. These weren't regular guards. They were supervisors. And ranked officers walking the tier at dawn meant one thing: a pull order. I moved closer to the bars, trying to see down the corridor. I caught a glimpse of 2 officers walking side by side. They weren't bulky or sloppy like the others. These men were sharp, disciplined. They were getting closer. I stepped back from the bars just as they reached my cell. The first one, a tall man in his mid-40s with a jawline that looked like it had been clenched for years, barked out my name without even looking at me. Lyle. Step out. I could feel the air shift behind me. Other inmates were leaning forward, their faces a mix of curiosity and tension. They knew, just like I did, that officers don't pull a man this early unless it's planned or personal. I stepped out, keeping my hands visible, my head level. No sudden moves. They cuffed me. It wasn't rough, but it wasn't gentle either. It was just firm, a clear reminder that whatever was about to happen was not up for negotiation. Eli's voice cut through the silence, a low whisper. Keep your eyes open. The lower corridor doesn't take you unless someone requested you. Before I could ask what he meant, an officer gave me a controlled push forward. They led me down the catwalk and toward a hallway I'd never seen before. The lower corridor. Every inmate knew the name, but few had ever seen it. And those who did, well, they never came back quite the same. The deeper we went, the colder the air became, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. The concrete walls looked darker here, older, as if they were stained by things that never made it into any official report. We reached a heavy metal door. It opened with a loud hiss, and they pushed me inside. The hallway seemed to swallow me whole. There were no other inmates, no guards posted at the corners. Just a sterile, oppressive emptiness. The officer on my left finally spoke. You're going to the evaluation room. I frowned. For what? The officer looked at me as if my question was the most amusing thing he'd heard all day. Day 4 protocol, he said. My stomach tightened. Protocol? Attica didn't have protocols for new inmates. Not like this. Not unless you were already on someone's radar. Someone with power had pulled my name. They led me into a small room, lit by a single, buzzing fluorescent bulb. In the center was a metal table. 1 chair on my side, 3 empty ones on the other. They sat me down, took off the cuffs, and then left, closing the door behind them. For a few seconds, I was alone. Then, a different door opened, and a man walked in. He wasn't a guard or a counselor. He wore plain clothes, a grey shirt, black slacks. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp enough to cut steel. He sat across from me. No introduction, no handshake. He just studied me, the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, clinically, coldly, silently. Finally, he spoke. "You've had 3 days to observe Attica." I didn't say a word. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Tell me what you've learned." This wasn't an interrogation. It was an exam, a test. I stayed silent, waiting. A faint smirk appeared on his face. "Good. You don't speak first. That's smart." He opened a file. I caught a glimpse of my own booking photo, a copy of a disciplinary log from just hours ago, and a note scrawled in red ink. Subject, marked. Marked. The same word Eli had used. "So let's not waste time," the man continued, his voice calm. "Do you know why you're here?" I swallowed, the weight of the question settling on me. Someone requested me. He sat back, folding his arms. Not someone. Several. My pulse spiked. Several? He leaned in again. "You've drawn attention. The wrong kind, maybe the right kind. That depends on how this conversation goes." The air grew even tighter. Attention from who? I asked. The man closed the file and pushed it aside, like he was clearing a chessboard. "From the people who decide who lives a week in Attica, and who doesn't." The silence was heavy. "Marcus Lyle. Day 4 begins now," he said. "And I'm going to ask you one question." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting it unsettle me. "If the prison were to choose a side for you, would you rather be protected or left alone?" My throat felt tight. It wasn't a question. It was a trap. A trap with no right answer. Some decisions in Attica change your day. Some change your sentence. But a few, the rare, irreversible ones, change how the prison itself sees you forever. Day 4 had just begun, and Attica wasn't just watching me anymore. It was judging me. I sat frozen. The man's gaze pressed down on me like the walls themselves had grown heavier. Protected or left alone? This wasn't a question about comfort. It wasn't about fear. It was a test of survival. I thought about the last 3 days. The intentional bump in the yard. That cryptic note slipped under my bunk. Marlowe, the scarred man who never stopped watching me. The weak wall, with names of those who didn't make it. Attica didn't give you instructions. It only gave you consequences. "If I choose protected," I managed to say, "what does that even mean? Who decides?" He leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "Time is a currency, Marcus, and you've already spent 3 days being observed. The next 3 will decide whether you earn a week, or whether your name is added to the wall." My pulse throbbed in my ears. "I still don't know what you mean by protected." His lips curved into a faint smile that never reached his eyes. "Protection in Attica isn't a shield. It's influence, favor, information. It's a network, a signal, a presence that tells others, leave this one alone." My stomach twisted. "And if I choose, left alone?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then the prison decides for you. You become just another body moving through the system, and everyone has a vote." He paused, his eyes locked on mine, calculating. Day 4 isn't about surviving the night. It's about surviving the people. And the people, they're more dangerous than the walls. Sweat pricked the back of my neck. The room felt suffocating. Every second stretched on, as if the walls were measuring my hesitation. I replayed the past 3 days in my mind. The bump, Marlowe's silent assessment, the notes, the whispers, the name on the wall. And suddenly, it all clicked into place. The yard incident was never random. The shadows were never idle. The tests were never meaningless. Attica wasn't a prison. It was a laboratory. I exhaled slowly. Then, "Protect me." He didn't react right away. He simply leaned back, folded his hands, and I knew I had just passed some invisible threshold. "Wise choice," he said. "But protection comes with responsibility." I frowned. Responsibility? For what? He tapped a file on the table once, a sharp, metallic sound. for survival, for information, for navigating the week, and, eventually, for deciding who else survives it. A chill slid down my spine. The man rose, silent, and walked to the door. He left without another word, pulling it closed with a click that echoed in the small room. I sat alone, my heart pounding, my thoughts spiraling. I realized something terrifying. I had just agreed to become part of Attica's system. Not just a survivor. Not just a player. A participant. And that meant that everything I thought I understood about this place was about to be rewritten. When I emerged back into the cell block, the shift was immediate. The inmates sensed it. Not through words, not through gestures, but in the way they moved around me. Their eyes lingered just a second too long. They didn't know where I'd been or what I'd agreed to, but they could feel the change. I felt it too. I walked down the tier with measured steps, observing the silent hierarchy, seeing every glance, every twitch, every half-smile as a signal. I now carried a dangerous knowledge, and the burden of being marked. Eli met me halfway down the tier and nodded slightly. So, you chose. I nodded back. Good, he said. But day 4 isn't over yet. Not until the corner sees you. Not until Marlowe decides. I swallowed hard. My pulse raced. I understood now. Protection in Attica didn't mean safety. It meant visibility. It meant scrutiny. And someone, or something, was still watching. Day 4 had begun with a question. It ended with a silent warning. In Attica, survival isn't about strength or fear. It's about understanding the rules you've never been told, and the people who wrote them. I had just agreed to play a game where I didn't even know the rules, and the week was only halfway over. Day 5 arrived like a storm breaking over the tier. Not in noise, not in sound, but in the way the air pressed down on everything, thick, suffocating, and charged with an unseen energy. Every step Marcus took felt heavier, as if the concrete itself was trying to pull him down. The usual, monotonous rhythm of the yard had vanished. Guards moved with a new sharpness, their steps clipped and deliberate. Inmate whispers grew quieter, more urgent. Shadows pulled in corners that should have been well lit, hiding secrets in plain sight. Marcus felt him before he even saw him. Marlowe. It wasn't just a man walking or a presence lingering. Marlowe was a predator moving through the air, through the floor, through the very atmosphere of the prison. He materialized at the far edge of the yard. Tall, scarred, and completely silent. Just watching. His eyes locked onto Marcus, unblinking, calculating, and cold. Marcus's pulse spiked, a drumbeat of panic in his chest, but he forced himself to keep moving casually, to keep his expression neutral. He couldn't show fear. Not now. Day 5 was the day the Watchers became participants. It was the day Attica finally moves its first piece on the board. Day 5 was the day the first blood would be drawn. The moment came, as it always does, when he least expected it, during chow. Marcus was halfway through a plate of unidentifiable grey mush when a commotion erupted near the center of the hall. A fight. It was quick, brutal, and sharp. But this wasn't about survival or vengeance. This was a message. Men circled around them, shouting. Some were laughing, some were yelling, and others were frozen with a stark, silent terror. For a moment, even the guards hesitated, watching, calculating which side needed intervention, and which side could be left to serve as a brutal example. Then, Marcus felt a light, almost ghostly touch on his shoulder. It was Eli. He was silent, his presence urgent. He whispered, his voice barely audible above the chaos. Don't move. Watch. Learn. This isn't random. This is the first cut. Marcus froze, his eyes glued to the scene. And then, Marlowe stepped into the hall. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicked or part of the chaos. He just moved with the absolute certainty of someone who owns the very floor he walks on. In that instant, Marcus understood. Marlowe didn't fight. He didn't have to. The prison itself obeyed him. The chaos obeyed him. The inmates, whether through fear or loyalty, obeyed him. A sharp, metallic noise cut through the room, the distinct, chilling sound of a knife being drawn. Marcus's stomach turned to ice. The fight was a performance. It had been staged, and Marlowe had orchestrated it all just so he could test Marcus's reaction. The injured inmate was nothing but a decoy. The knives weren't meant for survival. They were meant to see who would flinch. Marlowe's eyes met Marcus's across the hall. Just for a second. But in that second, A silent warning was delivered, a message as clear as a shout. The fight ended as abruptly as it began. Guards rushed in, finally pulling the men apart. Blood smeared across the floor like a ritual marking. The decoy inmate was dragged away, his purpose served. And just as quickly, Marlowe disappeared back into the shadows, a ghost in the machine. Marcus sat frozen, his hands gripping the edges of his tray so tightly his knuckles were white. His mind raced, piecing it all together. Day 5 wasn't about surviving fights. It wasn't about protecting yourself with your fists. It was about understanding the brutal, unwritten rules of attention. He realized something chilling. Every glance Marlowe had given him, every test, every seemingly accidental bump in the yard, every whisper he'd overheard. None of it was random. It wasn't just intimidation. It was a map. A map Marlowe was drawing of the men around him. A map of who could be trusted. A map of who would falter under pressure. A map of who would survive, and who wouldn't. By the end of Chow, Marcus understood one terrifying truth. Attica didn't just test your strength. It tested your patience. It tested your calm. It tested your ability to comprehend what was really happening under the surface of the violence. And today, Marcus had passed. But passing came at a price. The price of being noticed. Marked. And now, he was fully in the crosshairs. As Eli leaned in again, his voice was low and grim. Welcome to Day 5. The week only gets darker from here. By the time Marcus returned to his cell, the smell of blood still in the air and adrenaline coursing through his veins, he realized the next 3 days would define more than just his survival. They would define whether he was remembered, or whether he was forgotten like so many others. Attica had begun to write his story, and every single stroke of the pen would leave a scar. Day 6 arrived with no fanfare, no alarms, no chaos, no warnings, just the cold, steady grind of Attica's walls pressing in from every angle. I woke with the feeling of eyes on me, even before I opened my own. Not human eyes, not just guards or inmates. These were eyes inside the walls, watching, waiting, judging. The tier was quieter than usual. Even the murmurs of inmates felt hesitant, as if they, too, had learned something from the previous day. Eli was already awake, pacing lightly in his cell, eyes darting at shadows. He glanced at me as I emerged from my bunk. Day 6, he said. The corner. Shadows moved differently now. Pay attention. I knew what he meant. The corner was where the prison showed its teeth, where invisible lines became visible, where the strongest, the smartest, and the luckiest either survived, or became part of the story carved into the walls. I left my cell and walked slowly, deliberately, down the tier. Every step was measured, every glance calculated, every breath accounted for. The hallway smelled of damp concrete and something fouled, something lingering in the corners where light didn't reach. Then I saw it, a narrow hallway I had never noticed before. No sign, no markings, just a dark wedge tucked between the walls of the block. I knew instinctively, this was the corner of shadows. A place inmates spoke of quietly, if at all. A place whispered about during roll call, during the mess hall, during moments of forced quiet. A place where people entered and left different, or didn't leave at all. I took a deep breath and stepped in. The hallway was narrower than it looked. Shadows pulled in every corner. The walls seemed to bend slightly, trapping sound. A voice came from the darkness. Soft. Casual. You made it this far. I stiffened. Eli had warned me. The corner had observers, some official, some not. From the shadows stepped a man I had seen before, not a guard. Another inmate. Someone who had walked past me in the yard, invisible until now. Name's Bennett, he said. Heard you're new. Heard you're marked. I didn't answer. My instincts screamed at me. Bennett stepped closer, his voice lower. Don't act brave. Not here. Not in the corner. You think you're the only one being watched? Everyone here is a target, including me. But we can help each other. For a price. I understood immediately. The offer wasn't kindness. It was leverage. And what's the price? I asked. Bennett smirked, his teeth white against a face shadowed by the dim light. Loyalty. Information. A moment's silence. One wrong move, and you're next. He leaned closer. The corner sees everything, hears everything. If you're smart, you'll take my hand. If not, well, look at the weak wall. Pick your fate. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed, don't trust him. But every instinct also screamed, you need help to survive. The corner was unforgiving. Shadows moved like liquid, creeping along the walls, curling around our ankles. Every flicker of light seemed to watch us. I made a choice. A subtle nod. Bennett smiled, just slightly. Good. Step carefully. The corner doesn't forgive mistakes. And day 6 is when first blood is meant to stain the floors. We walked deeper into the shadows. The hallway seemed endless, winding slightly, bending light so I couldn't see what was ahead. Bennett stopped suddenly. Look, he whispered. I followed his gaze. A group of inmates ahead. But they weren't moving. They were crouched, watching, studying, waiting. Bennett's hand brushed my arm. Everyone here knows you're marked. The corner likes to see who panics, who flinches, who hesitates. You survive by being calm. Calm is rare here. I realized the truth. The corner wasn't just physical. It was psychological. It was a test. It measured not strength, not skill, not even fear. It measured control. And the first betrayal would come from someone I trusted. A sudden shuffle to my left. A whisper too loud. A laugh too quick. An inmate lunged toward me. Not violently. Not yet. But enough to make me flinch. Bennett grabbed my arm. Do not react. You just passed the first part. Keep your head. I froze. Every muscle taut. Heart pounding. Mind screaming. And in that moment, I understood. Day 6 wasn't a day to survive. It was a day to understand who your enemies are before they kill you. The betrayal wasn't in the blow. It was in the setup. The air in the corner got so thin it felt like the walls were breathing it all in. I could feel sweat, cold sweat, trickling down my spine. This wasn't just some forgotten part of Attica. This was a place where people were erased from existence. Bennett, my guide, moved through the shadows like he was born in them. Me. I felt like every step I took was being measured for my coffin. The other inmates, crouched and silent, turned their heads in perfect unison, their eyes locked on me. They were predators, deciding if I was prey. Bennett's whisper was a ghost in my ear. Now the second test begins. Stay focused. And whatever happens, don't look scared. Easy for him to say. I was terrified, and this place, Attica, it feasted on fear. Then, one of them stepped forward. His jaw looked like it was carved from granite, and a serpent tattoo coiled from his cheek down to his collarbone. He said nothing, just stared, his eyes dead, hollow, a void. Bennett leaned in again. Name's Rock. He doesn't talk. Doesn't need to. Rock slowly extended his hand, palm out. Was it a greeting? A challenge? A threat? I stared at that hand, knowing one wrong move and my day, my life, was over. Bennett's voice was barely audible. Shake it. You accept his challenge. Ignore it. He'll test you another way. Decide fast. I took a deep, slow breath, trying to control the tremor in my chest. Then I did something neither of them expected. I gave a small, respectful nod, but I didn't take his hand. Rock's eyes flickered with a hint of interest. He stepped back. A low murmur rippled through the onlookers. I had just passed a test I didn't even understand. A ritual of dominance, of restraint. A test that separated the hunted from the recognized. But it wasn't over. A sudden, violent shout echoed down the hall, followed by the sickening thud of metal hitting flesh. I whipped my head around. Another man stood over him, holding a shiv that glinted in the dim light. The crowd didn't panic. And then, all at once, every single eye shifted. To me. Here it comes, Bennett muttered. The man with the blade looked right at me and pointed it in my direction. Your turn, he growled. The world squeezed in on me. The walls, the air, it all felt like it had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Bennett took a step back, melting into the shadows. The unspoken rule became clear. In Attica, alliances only last until the real test begins. I stood there, facing the blade, hands empty, my heart hammering against my ribs. The corridor was silent, waiting for me to break. But before I could move, before I could make a fatal choice, a figure emerged from the shadows at the end of the hall. Tall, imposing, controlled. It was Marlowe. He walked with no urgency, no tension, as if a drawn blade was the most normal thing in the world. The other inmates parted for him like the sea, even the ones who were just thirsting for violence. He stopped right in front of me. He didn't look at the man with the blade. He didn't glance at the bleeding inmate on the floor. His eyes were locked only on me. "You're in my corner," he said, his voice low but carrying absolute authority. The blade wielder lowered his weapon instantly, like a reflex. Marlowe stepped closer, his gaze pinning me to the spot. "Protection isn't something you choose," he said. "It's something I give. And now that I've given it..." He turned his head slightly, surveying the silent crowd. "No one touches you unless I say so." The observers bowed their heads. The blade disappeared. Even Bennett and Rock backed away. I was left standing in the center, my breath shaking, cold sweat plastering my shirt to my skin. This wasn't safety. This was ownership. Marlowe didn't save me. He claimed me. And in that moment, I understood. The real danger in this place wasn't being attacked. Night in Attica was never truly dark. The light stayed on, always, buzzing with that faint, electric hum that drills into your skull over hours, then days, then weeks. But even with the light, the darkness always finds a way to crawl into the cracks. And on day 6, the darkness wasn't just crawling. It was whispering. Marcus sat in his cell long after the count, long after the incident in the corner, long after a man named Marlowe claimed him with a simple, terrifying phrase, "You're in my corner." It wasn't an offer of protection. It was a declaration of possession. He could feel his cellmate, Eli, watching him. Not with suspicion, but with concern. And that alone told Marcus that something was about to happen. Eli leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You understand it now, don't you?" he asked, his voice low. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. The unspoken truth hung in the stale air between them. Eli continued, "Marlowe didn't pick you for nothing. Nobody gets claimed for free." Marcus finally found his voice. "What does he want?" Eli took a slow breath, as if weighing his words. "Not want. Need. But don't think about that now. Think about surviving the night. The 6th night is different." Before Marcus could ask how, a sound echoed from the air vent above his bunk. Click, click, click. A slow, metallic, deliberate sound. Both men froze. Eli stiffened, his eyes wide. "No, not tonight," he whispered. The clicking grew louder, then stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, unnatural. And then, a whisper. A thin, strained voice, barely human, snaked out from a vent. "Marcus." His blood ran cold. How could anyone know his name like that? Who could be inside the vents? Eli was shaking his head, a silent, frantic warning. "Don't answer," he mouthed. "Don't respond. No matter what it says." But the voice continued, desperate and hauntingly alive. "Listen to me. You're in danger, worse than you think." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tight. His every instinct screamed to reply, but the pure terror on Eli's face held him back. "Marlowe, he's not protecting you, he's preparing you." Preparing him? For what? The whisper trembled, as if the speaker was fading. "They used me, the same way. They use anyone who shows potential. They choose you, then they watch you, then they shape you, until there's nothing left." This wasn't just a ghost story. This was someone who had lived through Marlowe's protection. Someone who hadn't survived it. Don't trust Bennett. Don't trust the corner. And don't let him call you brother. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Brother. Marlowe had never used that word. Not yet. Suddenly, the whisper turned urgent, frantic. "You have 1 day left. 1. Day 7 is the reason Attica survives." Then, a muffled choke, a frantic scramble, and a violent, metallic slam. The voice was gone. The vent was silent. Eli grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip like iron. "Do not mention this to anyone. Not Bennett, not the guards, not Marlowe, no one." Marcus stared at him, shaken to his core. Who was that? Eli hesitated, then answered in a whisper so low Marcus could barely hear it. "A dead man." "That was a living voice," Marcus insisted. Eli just shook his head. "Dead to the prison. Dead to the world. Dead the moment Marlowe chose someone else. We don't talk about the ones who vanish into the vents. They are warnings, echoes, and now one of them has spoken to you. Night 6 in Attica didn't offer sleep. It offered a horrifying truth. The whisper wasn't just a warning. It was a prophecy. Because tomorrow, day 7, was the day the prison would reveal what it really wanted from Marcus. The dead man's final words echoed in his mind as he stared at the buzzing light overhead. Day 7 is the reason Attica survives. Day 6 inside Attica, and the walls feel like they're breathing. Not literally, but the pressure, the tension, the way every sound echoes like a warning. It's enough to make any man wonder if time is bending around him. Tonight, our camera follows Marcus down a corridor few inmates ever see voluntarily, the Attica Infirmary, a place most describe as where pain goes to wait for company. The air is colder here, almost surgical. Fluorescent bulbs flicker above the tiled floor, buzzing like dying insects. Behind each door, you can hear muffled wheezes, groans, the faint clink of medical restraints. And then, Marcus hears it. A dry cough. Wet, strained, and somehow, familiar. He freezes. Another cough echoes down the hall. Marcus steps closer, his heart knocking hard enough to crack his ribs. He peers into one of the rooms, barely illuminated by a sickly yellow lamp. Inside, an old man sits propped up on the bed, hooked to an A4 bag that looks more like rust than saline. His hands tremble. His chest rises unevenly. But his eyes, those eyes snap open the second Marcus appears at the doorway. And Marcus recognizes him immediately. A man he hasn't seen since he was 13. His father. But this isn't the man who walked out on him. Not the man he imagined living freely somewhere, rebuilding his life. No. The man on this bed is broken. Thinner. Paler. His beard is grey and tangled. His face is etched with decades of violence, regret, and consequences. Marcus staggers back like he's been hit. His father struggles to sit up, wincing, but he forces a smile anyway. Didn't think you'd find me, not in here. Marcus stands frozen in the doorway. He can't breathe. He can't blink. The room feels like a trap, like the universe just revealed a twist he never asked for. All this time, Marcus thought his father had vanished into the world. Turns out, he had been rotting inside Attica for the last 10 years. Marcus steps inside slowly. He doesn't trust the moment, doesn't trust the place, and he definitely doesn't trust his father, not after the man disappeared when he needed him the most. But the dying man on the bed lifts a shaking hand, gesturing weakly. I heard you came in last week. Word travels fast in here. He pauses, coughing hard enough to curl his spine. I wanted to see you sooner, but this place, it takes more from you than you got to give. Marcus clenches his jaw. He wants to walk out. He wants to scream. He wants to grab his father and shake him until the truth comes spilling out. But instead, he whispers, "Why didn't you ever come back for me?" The question hangs in the air like smoke. His father's trembling stops. His tired, glassy, regretful eyes meet Marcus's. I tried. God knows I did. But the day I thought I'd get clean. The day I thought I'd fix everything. He looks down at the 4 needle taped to his arm. I ended up here instead. Marcus blinks slowly, like the world is tilting sideways. His father continues, "Son, these walls, they punish you different. Not just with time. They punish you with the memories you can't escape. You were the only thing I had worth going back to." Another cough, another painful breath. And I still failed. Silence. Pure, heavy, suffocating silence. Marcus takes a single step closer. Then another. And then he sits down beside the bed, not because he forgives the man, but because he's tired of carrying this anger alone. For a long moment, they simply sit. 2 men with the same blood, but completely different scars. There are no guards watching, no inmates listening. Just a father who lost everything, and a son who never got anything. Inside the infirmary, a place meant for healing, Marcus realizes something Attica tries to bury. Some wounds have nothing to do with prison. Then, a voice echoes from the hallway. Cold. Firm. Inmate. Time's up. A correctional officer pulls the door open. Marcus stands. His father tries to speak again, one last word, but the guard has already stepped between them. Marcus hesitates, gripping the doorframe. And his father whispers, barely audible, "I'm proud of you, son." Marcus freezes. His breath catches, but the guard shoves him out, slamming the door. The camera holds on Marcus's face, torn between peace, pain, anger, and something he thought died long ago, hope. Day 6 inside Attica ends not with violence, but with a truth that changes everything for day 7. Because now, Marcus isn't just surviving. He's confronting the one ghost he thought he'd outrun forever. Day 7 inside Attica. The final day. The one every inmate swears feels like it lasts a year. But for Marcus, today feels different. He didn't sleep a wink, not after seeing his father, not after hearing that final, trembling whisper, "I'm proud of you, son." That sentence just keeps replaying in his head, cutting deeper than all the shouting, threats, and violence he's endured this week. But the prison around him doesn't care about emotional storms. Attica wakes up the same way it always does, with a scream, a metal door slamming open, and a guard barking orders. Inmates snap awake like animals conditioned to fear the sunlight. Marcus rises from his bunk. Jacobs, his cellmate, watches him quietly, studying his face. "You look like you saw death last night," he says in a low, cautious voice. Marcus doesn't answer. He just ties his boots and steps into the freezing hallway. Something feels wrong. The corridors are too quiet. There's no trash talk, no clatter of chains, no guards rushing their morning rounds. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that warns you something is about to explode. Attica is never silent unless the silence itself is dangerous. As Marcus and the others march toward the Chow Hall, the atmosphere feels thick, like the air itself is hiding something. Even the CO escorting them keeps scanning the upper tiers, tapping his baton like a nervous tick. Inside the Chow Hall, breakfast trays slam onto metal tables. It's the usual: porridge, stale bread, and a smell that suggests the milk has lost its war with time. Marcus sits alone, his mind drifting back to the infirmary, to his father's eyes clouded with regret. But Jacob suddenly sits beside him, whispering urgently, "I need you to stay sharp today." Marcus just raises an eyebrow. "Rumor is, something's going down," Jacobs adds. Marcus stiffens. He looks around the Chow Hall. Inmates are huddled in tight circles, whispering under their breaths, their eyes darting between the guards and back again. This isn't the usual breakfast tension. This is planning. This is anticipation. Marcus leans in. What kind of something? Jacobs glances at the guards, 3 on the floor with hands hovering near their tasers, and 2 more watching from the catwalk. They say the lifers are making a move. Not sure what, but it's big. A chill slides down Marcus's spine. Attica isn't like other prisons. When something big happens here, it usually ends with blood on the concrete. Suddenly, the metal door on the far side of the hall slams open. All whispers stop. Every inmate freezes. Every guard straightens up. In walks Lieutenant Harrow, the same lieutenant who taunted Marcus on his first day. The same man whose voice carries an authority built on cruelty, not respect. His boots echo as he walks between the tables, his hands behind his back. He stops right beside Marcus, leans close, and speaks softly enough that only Marcus can hear. "Your father asked for you again." Marcus swallows hard. Too bad his time ran out this morning. Everything inside Marcus just goes still. The room doesn't spin, it collapses. His chest caves in like someone punched straight through it. Harrow smirks. Medical said they found him unresponsive an hour ago. It happens. Men get old. Bodies fail. Life goes on. Marcus's hands curl into tight fists under the table. It's not just the words, it's the way Harrow says them, cold, empty, almost pleased. Jacobs notices the change in Marcus's breathing. Marcus, look at me. Not at him. But Marcus's gaze stays locked on Harrow. The lieutenant taps a finger on the table gently, like knocking on a coffin. "You should have said goodbye when you had the chance." Then he walks away. Silence crushes Marcus. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of grief so sharp it feels like a blade slicing him open from the inside. He doesn't cry. He can't. He just sits there, breathing slow, controlled, dangerous breaths. The kind of man takes right before he decides whether he's going to break or burn everything down. Across the hall, inmates are standing up, one by one. Slow. Deliberate. The guards tense, hands on their weapons. The air shakes with a pressure that feels moments away from detonating. Jacobs whispers quickly, "Marcus, listen to me. Whatever you're thinking, don't. Not today. You're too close to getting out." But Marcus isn't thinking about release. He's thinking about his father lying on that infirmary bed, alone, cold, with no one to speak for him. And the lieutenant who delivered the news like it was a joke. Day 7 began with a death, and it's about to end with a decision Marcus never wanted to make. Because inside Attica, grief has a habit of turning into violence. And violence has a habit of choosing the wrong moment to ignite. The room vibrates with tension. A chair scrapes loudly. An inmate stands. Another follows. A guard shouts, "Sit down. All of you, sit down." But no one sits. Then Marcus rises too. Not because he wants to join whatever is starting, but because something inside him is changing, breaking, transforming. The final day inside Attica has begun. And before the sun sets, someone is going to bleed. Whether Marcus wants it or not. 7 days. 7 days inside Attica. That's all it was, but it felt like a lifetime carved into concrete. Marcus entered this prison as just another number in the system. Another inmate shuffled into a cell like cargo. But Attica doesn't just hold men, it reshapes them. From the moment he stepped inside, he came face to face with brutality masquerading as order, with a fear that waited behind every single steel door, and with choices that demanded pieces of his soul as payment. He walked through riots and conspiracies. He navigated threats, betrayals, and silences so heavy they could crush a man's sanity. He stood in the shadow of a violence that never truly sleeps, feeling the tension build until it became a second heartbeat inside his chest. He met men who had been hardened by decades behind bars, men completely broken by isolation, and guards who wielded power like a weapon instead of a responsibility. This was the world he was thrown into. But the moment that changed everything for him, the moment that cut deeper than any shank or any danger, was the one he never saw coming. It was the moment he saw his father alive. And then, in the very same breath, he lost him. In a place built to break prisoners down to nothing, Marcus learned a truth that people on the outside rarely ever understand. It is not the walls that crush you. It's the ghosts they trap inside with you. Those are the things that truly haunt you. 7 days. 7 endless nights. In those 7 moments, he could have easily chosen violence. He could have given in to the rage. But instead, he chose survival. Not because he was particularly brave, and not because he was unbreakable. He chose it because somewhere in the middle of this fortress of misery, he found a new purpose. He decided he would walk out of Attica as a man his father could finally be proud of, even if that pride came far too late. Attica didn't beat him. It didn't swallow him whole. It didn't turn him into the monster it wanted him to be. Instead, it forged him. But not into steel. Steel bends, steel rusts. It forged him into something even harder to destroy. Resolve. The kind of resolve that says, I survived the place where time stops, where days stretch into forever, where every sunrise feels like a warning. He went in with a sentence to serve, but he walked out with a story to tell. Marcus entered Attica as a sentence. He left it as a story. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of the world, humanity claws its way through. This was 7 days inside Attica, a week that feels like a year. It's a story not just about prison, but about the man who walked through hell and refused to leave his soul behind. Some places change you forever, but a place like Attica doesn't just change you, it reveals who you truly are. And Marcus, he walked out knowing one thing for sure, he didn't just survive the week, he survived Attica. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.